The cicadas were already screaming when I rolled the last cardboard box onto the moving truck. Heat shimmered above the asphalt like a living thing, and the smell of freshly cut grass clung to the air. I should have felt relief. My house in the meticulously manicured Willow Creek subdivision was sold, my new life in the mountains of Colorado waiting, but instead I kept glancing over my shoulder. Because Karen was watching. Karen wasn't her real name. It was Ellen Davenport, HOA president, neighborhood watch captain, self-appointed ruler of our cul-de-sac, but everyone in Willow Creek called her Karen behind closed doors. She had that trademark helmet of blonde hair and a permanent frown that could curdle milk. I'd been in her crosshairs ever since I painted my shutters a tasteful charcoal instead of the approved eggshell. Her Lexus SUV idled at the corner, window rolled down just enough for me to see her cell phone pressed to her ear. I knew the call wasn't to a friend. Tom, she barked to her husband, who was half hidden behind a hedge. She can't move without a 30-day WA exit inspection. Stop her. Tom gave me an apologetic shrug. He was harmless, really, but the engine of her Lexus revved like a challenge. I wasn't breaking any laws. The house had passed every county inspection. The WA guidelines mentioned, courtesy notice, not mandatory permission. Still, when I heard the distant wail of sirens minutes later, a knot of dread twisted in my stomach. By the time the squad car slid to a stop, Karen was standing triumphantly at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, a tight smile spreading across her face like oil on water. "Officer," she called, her voice syrupy sweet. "She's vacating the property illegally. The bylaws state." The officer looked confused. "Ma'am, you can't call the police for someone moving out of their own house." Karen launched into a tirade about community standards and unauthorized departures, waving a thick binder of WA rules. Her voice rose until it cracked. I could have argued. I could have shown the signed closing documents and the legal right to move wherever I pleased. Instead, I leaned casually against the moving truck and dialed a number on my phone. It rang once. "Hey Mom," came the warm baritone on the other end. "Hi, sweetie," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've got a situation here. A neighbor called the cops because I moved out without her permission. Can you talk to someone?" There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Put me on speaker." Karen's eyes narrowed as I tapped the button. "This is Special Agent Daniel Morales, FBI," my son's voice said, calm and commanding. "May I know which officer I'm speaking with?" The patrolman straightened unconsciously. Officer Reeves, sir." "Officer Reeves, thank you for responding," Daniel continued. "My mother is within her constitutional rights to vacate her property. Unless there's evidence of criminal activity, which there isn't, this is a civil matter. I'd also like to note that false emergency calls can be considered misuse of police resources." The silence that followed was delicious. Karen blinked, mouth opening and closing like a startled goldfish. I was only. "Ma'am," Daniel's voice cut through the air like a blade, "please refrain from harassment. My team monitors these incidents closely." Officer Reeves cleared his throat. "Ma'am, unless you have proof of a crime, I'm going to ask you to step aside." Karen's face flushed crimson, but she retreated a step. The officer gave me a nod, murmured something about paperwork, and left. My son stayed on the line just long enough to ask, "You okay, Mom?" "I'm perfect," I said, grinning at Karen. "See you in Denver tomorrow. I thought that would be the end of it, but Karen wasn't finished. 2 nights later, as I cleaned the now empty kitchen for the last time, my phone buzzed. It was my realtor. "Lena," she said anxiously, "the WA is trying to block the sale. They claim you left unpaid fees and community damages. Total nonsense, but they're threatening to sue." I stared at the dark window where the cul-de-sac streetlight haloed the evening mist. "Of course they are." The next morning, a thick envelope slid under my door. A formal letter from the WA board accused me of unauthorized egress, demanding a $5,000 penalty for diminishing neighborhood integrity. The absurdity made me laugh until it didn't. They were trying to bully me into submission. I called Daniel again. "Mom," he said after I finished, "they're towing the line of extortion. Let me handle it." That evening, Karen got a knock at her door, not from me, but from a federal postal inspector accompanied by a county attorney. They served her with a cease and desist order for harassment and a stern reminder about mail tampering, since she'd also intercepted a certified letter from my buyer. The neighborhood grapevine went wild. Tom, her husband, whispered apologies to me when I stepped outside. "I keep telling her, Ellen, you can't control everything. But control was all she understood. Karen tried one last stunt the night before closing. I was loading the final suitcase into my car when her Lexus screeched to a halt behind me, blocking the driveway. "You can't just leave," she hissed, eyes glinting under the porch light. "People like you think you're above the rules." "People like me?" I asked quietly. "People who don't respect the community. You think because your son waves a badge you can ignore us?" Her voice trembled, more desperate than angry. "Do you know what happens when one person disobeys? Everything falls apart." I took a deep breath. "Karen, Ellen, this isn't about rules. This is about control, and I'm done being controlled." Behind me, headlights swept across the driveway. A dark SUV rolled to a stop. Daniel stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered in a simple jacket. He wasn't in uniform, but something about his presence made Karen falter. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" he asked, his tone quiet but edged with steel. Karen's lips quivered. For the first time, she seemed small. "This is our community." Daniel nodded. "And communities work when neighbors respect each other's rights. My mother has every right to leave. Blocking her driveway is obstruction. Let's not make this more serious." The fight drained from her like air from a punctured balloon. Without another word, she climbed back into her Lexus and drove off, taillights bleeding red into the night. The next morning, I handed over the keys to the buyers, a young couple excited to start their life there. As I drove away for the last time, sunlight spilled across the tidy lawns and perfect hedges. Karen stood at her mailbox, arms folded, but she didn't move or speak. For the first time in years, I felt free. Later, Daniel met me at a roadside cafe outside Denver. He hugged me tight, and we both laughed when I told him about Karen's final stand. "You know," he said, sipping his coffee, "people like her are loud because they're afraid of silence. You gave her silence." I smiled. "And you gave me courage." The mountains loomed ahead, purple and endless, and I knew I'd never look back.